It's time. Get your popcorn.
Get your candy. Get your chicken fingers.
And most of all, get comfortable. Because it's time for Royal Cast Live! What's up, everybody? And welcome to the Royal Cast Live, the only bi-weekly online variety show that brings you artists, authors, dancers, and the creative community live streamed to your favorite device. I'm Mutalo Olutosin. Some people call me Sweet Lou, and I'll be curating your journey through the Royal Cast landscape. Happy New Year, everyone. New Year's always bring hope. As Americans, we tend to have pretty high levels of hope built into our existence. And this perpetual hopefulness is at least part of the reason that we've held such a unique station in the world. You see, we've defined ourselves as the land of the free and the home of the brave. But what does that mean? Now, what does that mean to you? It occurred to me that the idea of defining a thing, anything, an inanimate object, a group of people, or oneself for that matter, was really not such a big deal. I mean, you can call a golf ball a basketball, but that doesn't make it so. See, the key is getting others to accept your definition or your redefinition. Take, for example, the riot that occurred on January 6th at the US Capitol. An angry mob of mostly Caucasian people broke through crowd control barriers, they overwhelmed law enforcement, and they entered the building. They desecrated the People's House with the goal of killing the Vice President and Speaker Pelosi, just because they disagreed with the results of the election. Now, clearly, the rioters had declared that certain congressional leaders were deserving of death, and they fully intended to give it to them. Now, these are some really strange events to be happening in the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? I mean, after all, the founders of this country would absolutely be outraged at such behavior. Or would they? You can decide that one for yourself. However, I submit that throughout America's existence, our leaders have conveniently defined our acceptable behaviors, our economics, even the uses and instrumentalities of force, all with very vague and ambiguous terms, treaties, and laws. Convenience in this case can be interchanged with the term doublespeak. You see, when an issue is contentious, volatile, or has certain or uncertain outcomes, we get government doublespeak. My Native American brothers know about this well. One society or one section of society hears one thing when they hear a certain term, and the rest of society hears something completely different. It's kind of like code words. Now, we've seen lots of examples over the life of this country, but especially over the last 5-6 years of this being used. But what are we really seeing as we watch video clips of rioters storming the Capitol buildings, threatening death to government leaders across the country? Here's my take on it. From the beginning, our country has struggled with one primary issue: how to live up to the constitutional ideas of equal treatment under the law and the promise of liberty and justice for all. We've struggled because our national leaders had no intention of extending those concepts to all of its citizens. A quick internet search will tell you that there's adequate evidence to support my assertion. Check out the 3/5 compromise for a start. You see, America started out with a healthy dose of dishonesty baked into its fabric. And that complements the high hopes that we are known for. Come to think of it, one could make an argument that such high levels of dishonesty could only exist with the counterbalance of America's perpetual hope. But that's just my take on it. The Capitol riots should concern us all, as they represent a significant and fundamental break from American unification. But still, my deeper concern is that of the dishonesty that created the circumstances for the riot in the first place. There should never be another day in which our country does not acknowledge its own deep-seated dishonesty regarding its conception, ideas on equality, and presenting its own origin story. Until America addresses this dishonesty in these regards, we will always revisit riots and disturbances of the type we've just seen on a cyclic basis. It doesn't go away. We have to address it, and it's up to us.
Look, friends, things are tough everywhere in the world these days. One can easily find themselves in what seems like the most hopeless of circumstances. The one thing I can tell you for sure is there's always hope. There's always another option. Always. Sometimes hearing the right words is all it takes to set you straight. Here's a message from our Director of Communications.
Faith doesn't make it easier. Faith makes it possible. Just keep on.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Royal Cast Challenge. This is the time in the show where everybody watching gets to show everybody else how smart they really are. So the challenge works like this. I'll give you a question and everybody will have 48 hours to get their response in. You'll just send your response in by text 470-220-4518. Everyone has a chance to win. Now, everybody's not gonna win, but everybody has a chance to as long as you enter. This week's challenge. Although racism segregated African Americans from Caucasians, the ideas were codified into law, forbidding whites to marry blacks in the United States in 1664. Now that law stood until 1967. Some states followed suit by abolishing their state laws likewise. However, many states slowly abandoned their interracial marriage bans until finally the country was all on the same page. The question to you is, what state was the final holdout and when did they finally get a clue? Was it Texas in 1999? Was it Mississippi in 2005? How about South Carolina in 1975? Or it could have been Alabama in the year 2000. In a few seconds, you will see the workings of a modern master. Let me prepare you. After a brief intro by Maestro Eric Reed, you'll see Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers live at the Smithsonian. The song is entitled New York, and it was written by Donald Brown. The performance is followed by a Donald Brown arrangement written for the Boys Choir of Harlem. And then the final selection is a Donald Brown working project. After that, we'll have a conversation with the great master himself.
So I'm here with my good friend Donald Brown, my mentor, my hero. He's one of the world's most amazing musicians, pianists, composers. And the generation of you and Mulgrew, James Williams, Kenny Kirkland, I always like to make an analogy to the generation of pianists that had Monk and Bud Powell and Elmo Hope and Herbie Nichols. And you're like the Monk of that group. You don't just write tunes, you don't just write little ditties, you write compositions. And your compositions, the voices are very specific. Also Wayne Shorter, I checked out some of Wayne Shorter's charts, and his voices are very specific. When you hear other people play your music, and if it's me, that's okay too. When you hear other people play your music and they're not playing the voicings quite right, do you say anything? How do you feel? Do you say, here man, here's a chart? Or what do you do?
I'm probably like you still want to hear somebody put that stamp to and expand it, as long as it doesn't take it out of character.
Gotcha.
Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. Jazz at the Smithsonian.
And ladies and gentlemen, we are here with the one and only Donald Brown. Thank you so much, Donald, for coming. I want to give you a hand right now for showing up at the Royal Cast and spending a little time with us. How are you today?
Oh, good, Lou. How you doing, man?
Doing wonderful, doing wonderful. So, obviously, it's a real pleasure for me to spend any time with someone like you because your experiences are so vast. You've done so much for this music, and you continue to give and contribute in ways that most of us will never even realize. But one of the areas I want to talk with you about is your compositions, because that's really what brought me to you. A particular composition, and that I end up writing a lyric to, but it's just, your music is so beautiful and so touching. Tell me, who are the people who have influenced you and the way that you approach composition?
Well, you know, as I mentioned before, I never took composition lessons, but I always feel like I learned to compose by studying the great composers. So going back for me, one of the guys that had a really big influence on me wanting to write was Booker T, with Booker T and the MGs. I mean, I could play like 8 or 10 of their songs. And you know, that whole Stax situation, the Otis Redding, Papa's combination of people, and then you had Isaac Hayes and David Porter. Their music and played a big influence on me. But usually with songwriting teams, if you, right now I'm throwing out some R&B names, you know, like Ashford and Simpson, and Burt Bacharach, you know. Speaking of which, man, I don't know if you heard this great album Burt Bacharach did with Ron Isley. If you can imagine that combination.
Wow.
And man, needless to say, he does, you know, they do his music, but man, Ron Isley just sounds so hip and fresh. And then Burt did some just beautiful arrangements. But and then, you know, like I said, you got the different Motowns, songwriting teams with Smokey Robinson and Holland Dozier, Holland. And then at Philadelphia International, you had Gamble and Huff.
Right.
You had cats like Dexter Wansel. And so it was, you know, and then that's not to get into just, you know, whether you're talking about Earth, Wind, and Fire, you know, was writing, you know, combining with people from David Foster and Bernie Worrell with Paul and Funkadelic was a big influence. But you know, the order of the day right now is more jazz. So for jazz, it goes back to me from Scott Joplin to Jelly Roll Morton, of course, Duke Ellington, the repertoire of Count Basie, Neil Hefti, the stuff he was writing. And then, what's that?
What about Benny Golson's writing? Any influence?
Yeah, it was just eye-opening. And the beautiful thing was I had learned a lot of the music, so then to get to play it with Art Blakey just was like really just unreal. But Benny Golson, needless to say, man, if you can go through this music without being influenced by Benny Golson, then you're missing out on something. And another big influence, of course, was Monk, Thelonious Monk, and Benny Golson, Horace Silver, Tad Dameron. Then you get into people like Freddie Hubbard, Bill Evans, not just the trio, but the stuff he was writing for the trio. But yeah, that whole generation to me of Freddie Hubbard, Joe Henderson, Wayne Shorter, and Wayne music takes you through so many periods, and it's still evolving today.
Three successful individuals, would you say, impacted your musical career the most?
Well, I have to say, I was trying to think in order that I met them. But I met James Williams first in 1972. And, James just he mentored me. He showed me the ropes. He would, me and my wife, we joke about it now, but because, I was naive about dating, didn't know nothing about etiquette dating. And so James had a way of making me feel guilty. And he said, man, you want to go down here Phineas tonight? And I said, James, I'm supposed to be taking Dorothy out tonight. And James would say, oh man, you got your whole life to do that. So I was going to the Phineas, and my wife, who I was dating at the time, would be home, pissed at me, and and she said the next day I'd call her and act like nothing happened, which shows you how naive I was. And James turned me onto a lot of records, and he showed me a lot of tunes, and so he really believed in me. And to this day, I realize how blessed I am to have somebody believe in me, because I was an introvert and still is to a great degree. But James was always bragging about me to anybody I ran into, and they said, James Williams said you can do this, and James said you can do this, and so as I told you, I wouldn't be here talking to you today if it wasn't for him, because he recommended me. He was trying to get me to enroll at Berklee in 1974, and it didn't work out. And ironically, I ended up teaching there in 1983. But while I was there, living in Boston those 6 months, and I think I told you I was playing at a strip joint, which my students, when I tell them that, they look at me like, Mr. Brown, I can't believe you did that. But, it was a way to make money. And, right. But, James, he recommended me, and I may have said that in the last interview, to Pat Martino and Clark Terry and Eddie Carter, and I turned them down, and so then he recommended me for the Art Blakey gig, and I auditioned and got that, and I'm in Knoxville because of James. They offered a teaching job here at the University of Tennessee. They offered to Ellis Marcellus at first. And Ellis was teaching somewhere in Virginia, and he wasn't interested. So then they offered it to James, and James wasn't interested in taking it. And James told them about me, and they flew me down and interviewed me and auditioned me, and I ended up getting the job here in Knoxville, and just retired, as you know, and taught here 32 years. And
wow, 32 years?
Yeah, 32 years and 5 years teaching at Berklee. So I've been in academia a pretty good minute. And,
wow.
But James was, like I say, he just gave me great advice. Sometimes there was a time when Nat Adderley called me for a gig, and somebody else called me for a gig, and James told me, well, take both of them, and you can always bag out of them. And so, I found myself in situations like that. And but I could go on talking about him and get teary-eyed, because the love I had for that cat. I mean, he was just a selfless guy, and he's responsible for. I'd run into Diane Reeves or any number of people, and they said, James Williams was telling me about you. So it was always that situation, and then. I think it was around my second or third year at Memphis State in maybe like 1970. Well, no, actually it was more like 1975 or 76 when I was teaching and living in Boston those 6 months. And a friend of mine called me back and told me that, they had some studio work for me. And I knew of Michael Toles from him playing with Mark Hayes and Isaac Hayes. And somehow he heard of me. I don't know how. But he called me to do some sessions, and it was kind of weird because Marvell Thomas, Rufus Thomas' son, was doing a lot of the sessions around Memphis, and but Michael, liked me because I could do kind of the Stax thing, the way Benny Latimer would play piano. I knew some of that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, I had the jazz element going, and I think Michael probably thought that sounded fresh. So he recommended me for it was a I can't think of the guy's name, but he had a production company that he was a co-founder of with my cousin William Bell, and so that's how I ended up. I was the first when I went to Atlanta to play on a William Bell record called Listen Here. I think that's the name of it. And then later Michael got me on sessions in Detroit with a guy who had a hit out named Dennis Coffey. He had Scorpio. But anyway, Michael got me on that session, and then he got me on the sessions out in California with Clarence McDonald, who was a pianist that co-produced the album The Emotions with Best of My Love. I think Clarence co-produced the track. I produced the track Don't Ask My Neighbor, and then he played on Bill Withers' Lovely Day, and I think he played on some stuff with James Taylor, and but he was just, you can see, but that was like idol for me, like Bobby Rao, like I was telling you, that generation of cats, they could play jazz. I mean, Clarence could sit down on the breaks and play Cherokee in different keys, and that's what that made it exciting for me, being young and wanting to go to LA. And I tell people I never dreamed that my first trip to LA would be playing in the studio. And we recorded in the studio where Bobby Caldwell recorded What You Want to Do for Love. And so there's so much magic of surrounding that session. But Michael hooked that up. And then he would just call me for sessions, around Memphis. And I learned a lot from him about how to fit in with the guitar. But he got me the gig with Willie Mitchell, Lyle Green's producer. And I was like a staff musician there. So I was kind of on 24-hour call. And, we recorded a guy. He was fairly known in the folk pop music scene, named Jesse Winchester, who he ended up moving to Canada, but I think he was originally from Memphis. But he was, like I said, he was fairly well known, and to play on the album with him, and we did maybe 4 or 5 albums, and in between that, I was touring with people like Ann Peebles, who did I Can't Stand the Rain, and Denise LaSalle. So it was, like I said, to me, it was like going to school.
Wow.
I was definitely learning stuff, night in and night out, getting to open for Larry Graham in Graham Central Station, and opening for McFadden and Whitehead, Ohio Players, and there were other artists, but like I said, all that stuff kind of started happening more when I met Michael.
Wow.
And then the other person is my manager, who lives in Paris, France, who is a nuclear physicist, but he's also a killer piano player named Xavier Felgeros. And I just met him through, God's blessing, because he just happened to hear my first album called Early Bird, and he said that was one of his favorite records he had heard that year. So he called the record company Sunnyside and asked the owner of the label, Francois Zalakane. He said, I can get in touch with Donald Brown, and Francois gave him my number, and Xavier invited me over to this festival. I think I mentioned it to you before, that he has every October. And so each year he'd have a new breakout artist group. And so that year, I think it was maybe 1999, my group was featured on the festival, and I was on this big poster, walking around France, seeing myself on some big buildings. But it was, I'd been to Europe a lot of times with Art Blakey and different people, but anyway, let me bring a band over there. It was supposed to be the people on the original record with Jeff Watson, Don Harrison, and Steve Nelson, and so on. And Don Harrison couldn't make it, so I got Gary Bartz to do it. And
Cool.
Jeff Watson couldn't do it, so I ended up getting a drummer. He happened to be living here in Knoxville named Samurai Celestial, and he had played with Samurai about 10 to 11 years. And but so I got him to do it, and who else? Bill Mobley on trumpet and Ira Coleman on bass. So man, I was in.
I bet it was swinging.
Have my own band and play my own music, and Winston was on the festival that year, and Kenny Warren and people like that, and I got to become really good friends with Kenny, but yeah. So then my manager, like I say, he started a label later, maybe like a couple of years after I met him, called Space Time, and I was the first artist he recorded on the label, and so I think I've done about maybe 8 records for that label, something like that. And then he'd book me on gigs, because otherwise, I probably wouldn't get called to, it'd probably be hard for me to hook up with booking agents. And so I knew at least 2 to sometimes 3 times a year I would be going to Europe, and that would be because of Xavier. And like I say, there were French musicians I know would give him a hard time, like, why are you always in with Donald and stuff? And, he really, to this day, he just believes in me and my music. And he's, I composed a song for him on my cartoons album called Mr. Felgerose. And, but he, I just love him to death. And he helped a lot of people get their careers kind of going, like Jackie Terrison and Lionel Loueke before Lionel got a big record. He did a record for Xavier, and Xavier was booking gigs for him. And so he's a person to know if you, on the music scene, interested in the music scene, not only around France, but Europe,
That's really special.
Diane Reeves and Dee Dee Bridgewater, just all kinds of people he'd have on the festival. So to sum up your question, those 3 names of James Williams and Michael Toles and Xavier Felgerose, I would have to credit the reason I'm sitting here talking to you today.
That's beautiful. And it's so special, man, because in the entertainment industry, period, it's so cutthroat that, it's like people will cut your throat literally for $1. It's so when you can finally meet somebody who still realizes that the most important dimension is the human dimension, the humanity that we have inside each other, that is really something special.
And and I tell people, he put me before he put himself. And I remember I took the job down here at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and James told him to tell me, he said, don't go down there and be all apologetic and stuff, because, he knew I just didn't have any confidence and stuff. And he said, you Donald Brown, he said, they don't know who you are. And, and he would always, he said it as a joke, but he probably may have meant it, but I heard that most of the time I knew him. Man, you Donald Brown, man. They don't know who you are. It's like, so it's something I don't take for granted. It's people, almost any gig I did, if James was there, and sometimes if he wasn't there, his name would, I'd tell people, he was like a manager, he was like a... and so,
did it all.
It's something I don't take for granted. These people could have chosen anyone with just as much talent or more. So I thank God, that they believed in me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've been used. When it comes to touring, who are the players who have impacted you the most?
Who I really just enjoy touring with, needless to say, Art Blakey's at the top of the list. for the obvious reason. He's one of the founders of this music, and I always said anything, any criticism I got, I was getting it directly from the horse's mouth. And the stories alone, made it worth it. But to get a chance to play with him on 2 different occasions, I think Cedar played with him on a few occasions, or maybe George Cables. But I played with him in '81 and then rejoined him in '86. And both bands, the first band was what I think I may have mentioned on the first interview, but was Winton and Bradford and Billy Pierce and Charles Sambro. And the second time the band was Kenny Garrett and Wallace Roney, and trombone player I couldn't think of last time, but it was Tim Williams. And Jean Toussaint on tenor saxophone and Peter Washington on bass. And so Art Blakey and probably the next for me would be Freddie Hubbard. And again, I learned so much of his music and really learned a lot of his solos. And I just feel like I just soaked up so much of his spirit and soul. And so to get to play with him, and Carl Allen was responsible for, recommending me. Freddie had heard me, he said once with Art Blakey, but Carl recommended me, so I always tease Carl because, we're like brothers, and so occasionally we might get an argument or something, but I said, well, you're going to win, because I said, you can't do no wrong, man. You got me the game with Freddie Hubbard. And, but, another guy I really enjoyed touring with, I toured some with Kenny Garrett, some on some gigs that Kenny Kirkland could make, and then I toured some with Tom Harrell, which was another great treat, but just, he's one of those guys you hear him play every night, and you're going to be learning music, and, and then his writing is just, again, he's one of the great writers of this music, and, but yeah, it's some of the most fun parts I had of playing with Tom was just kind of picking his brain, and I could flatter him because I knew I knew his history of some of the rock bands he had played with, and then I knew some of his songs, but like I say, he's a quiet guy, boy, but you're talking about brilliant, genius mind, and so touring with Tom Harrell, and it was different bands, and but I think one of the fun bands was with Don Braden and Larry Grenadier on bass, and maybe it might have been Billy Hart on drums, and so but then I did another fun tour was with Eddie Lockjaw Davis and Johnny Griffin. If you can imagine the two of them on stage, but they had done some records where the two of them had, it was both of them were on the records, and so we did some tour through New York, and I think the last one was at the Jazz Showcase in Chicago. But it was a great fun band with Kenny Washington on drums and Curtis Lundy on bass, and so man, I was boy. I got cassettes of a lot of this stuff. I was kind of still nerdish. It's like I got a lot of tapes of me playing with Art Blakey. I got a lot of tapes of me playing with Freddie Hubbard, and but I was taping myself a lot.
We got some of that, Donald.
Just to see how I was measuring up to the other guys and what I needed to do to fit in, and another guy I know who tapes himself a lot was Harold Mabry. So I was thinking, well, it's good enough for me. It's good enough for me, but like it was the second time I was with Art Blakey, and Wallace left the band to go with Tony Williams, and so for a brief while, Woody Shaw was in the band. So that was exciting. Woody rejoining Art's band, and it seemed like Terrence Blanchard may have come down and sat in that night. So it's like Terrence and Woody together, and then I got some cassettes of me playing the Blue Note with Freddie, with Winton sitting in, and Freddie and Winton going at it, and that was the band with Kenny Garrett and Ira Coleman and Carl Allen. So, like I say, I think some few gigs with Diane Reeves that wasn't enough for me. With her, she's just a sweetheart of a woman and a beautiful sister. And is just icing. And so, and some others, but probably another lastly, I'm just going to throw out so we can move on, was getting to work with Tu Stillman. And it was, I think it was about a week at the Village Gate, downstairs, Village Gate. And it was a fun gig with Toots and Mark Johnson, the bassist that used to play with Bill Evans, was playing bass, and Billy Hart was on drums. And it was fun. I don't know if you got to listen to that Quincy record with Toots playing bluesette, where he's playing a guitar and he's whistling his solo. But like I say, he'd play harmonica on some songs, and then he'd play guitar and do the whistling thing.
Wow.
And boy, you talking about something soulful and just
yeah.
And he was just he did that stuff on Sesame Street, the harmonica stuff, but he was like I said, I think we did that week at the Village Gate, and then we may have done a few gigs around the New England area, but like I say, it was I think a week at Catalina's in California with Richard Davis, and I think the band was Javon Jackson and Ronnie Barrage on drums. And it was kind of interesting. The first night we played Who Walks Through the Doors, we were doing our sound check with Verlene White. I had met him. I think you saw the picture of, I told you we were the band. They were interested in possibly signing our band. And so I asked him, I said, man, what are you doing here? And he said, well, Richard was one of my first teachers. And I said, bingo, there you go again. It's like, this is why I love this music, is that I seem like all my heroes, they could play R&B, a gospel, a rock, but they can play jazz. And that's going back when you're talking about Quincy Jones, Al Jarreau, or you're talking about Bobby Lowell. I mean, Clifford Brown. I mean, they played music that was considered, jump music, R&B music for that time.
At that time, exactly.
I was living the dream. I felt like, I was kind of feel like I could play rhythm and blues music authentically, and then jazz authentically, and I felt comfortable. If whoever called me, I felt like I know
you were good.
Yeah. But probably more of my collaborations was more with rhythm and blues artists. Like, they were coming up in Memphis. There were a couple of guys I worked with that they had great lyrics, and I would put music to it, and we would get it recorded with upcoming artists, but it never went anywhere in terms of hits or anything. But there was a guy, Alex McMillan, and then there was a guy named Lee. I don't know why. I think I'm getting Alzheimer's early, but Lee.
Hope not.
I can't think of his name. But we wrote a lot of songs for him. We were part of a production company. And this is a friend of mine named Angelo Earl, who I think I told you worked with the Barcades and the Funk Brothers and Tito Jackson. But we did a lot of writing together. But in terms of jazz, probably one of the bigger collaborations I had to be involved with was with the Boys Choir of Harlem. It was a recording. It was a Christmas record they did that James Williams. It was kind of his record, but they put it out under the Boys Choir's name. But James, it was the label he was with, and so he asked me would I arrange a couple of tunes for him, and I was a little reluctant because I hadn't done anything like that with just voices, And
Oh, okay,
and
gotcha.
so but I arranged the record featured him and Diane Reeves as guests with the Boys Choir of Harlem, and I did an arrangement of the Christmas song that Diane Reeves sung, and then
Which
I did an arrangement of Silent Night that featured James on piano. And in terms of producing, I've collaborated. I think this we just today finished the mastering on Kenny Garrett's next record. And so, if I'm right, I think this is the 8th record I've done with produce for him. And but it's a collaboration. He sends me the music, and I give him my opinion on the music. When asked. But we think alike and feel the music a lot alike. And so because I always feel like, well, Kenny could get anybody to produce him, but I'm just thankful that he asked me to produce it. So he's fun to work with, and needless to say, he's always had great artists on. Like the first record I produced of his was called African Exchange Student, and that's Ron Carter and Elvin Jones and Mulgrew on piano, and Shawnette Moffett and Tony Rivas. And then there was some other records, but probably one of the most fun records I had doing with them was called Black Hope. And that was fun for a lot of reasons. Joe Henderson was on it, so you're getting to hang with him every day and hear him. But then Kenny Kirkland was on it. And so for me, that was fun, because I got to know Kenny some, and I didn't realize, he had such a great sense of humor. And, but, it's just a beautiful brother that died too early, and we all know the stamp he left on the piano legacy of his music. And Kenny had some great music on it, and Shawnette Moffett on bass, and Brian Blades was on drums. And then he used this guy, Ricky, I can't think of his last name, but he was playing with Miles at the time. But he's kind of known as kind of one of the founders of the go-go music around D.C.
Oh!
Kenny had a few tunes, with that vibe on it that Ricky played on. I played synth on a few tunes, and there was this one tune that you hear my voice on that I started out talking with the guys in the band, and I'm imitating Damon Wayans from Living Color, what he was doing, the skit on Handyman, handicapped dude, and I'm kind of mimicking his voice. But needless to say, man, it was just a learning experience from the dealing with the engineering studio part, to hearing Kenny and Joe react, Kenny Garrett and Joe playing off each other, and then, like I say, Kenny Kirkland. So, but we've done a lot of fun records together. There was a record with Diane Reeves I did. What was the original title? Maybe Ancient Swords. I can't remember the original title. And I played on some of it, and then they went back and redid some of the tracks with Mulgrew. And but for a while it was released only in Japan. I can picture the cover, but man, these days,
Well, I understand.
Away from my memory, but it was a great record, needless to say. And Diane and Mulgrew, they did the McCoy tune that's now become a standard for vocalists. You taught my heart to sing.
Yeah. Oh,
you've heard that one?
Yeah, that's a beautiful song, man.
Yeah, Diane sings the mess out of the Mulgrew's accompaniment, and I don't know if you heard the original one with Phyllis Hammond. It's on the McCoy record. McCoy, really? Phyllis Hammond, and Marcus Miller on bass, if I remember right. And McCoy plays electric piano. That's the first time I think I heard him play some Fender Rhodes or something on it. but yeah, before him playing with Phyllis Hammond, and since then, a lot of vocalists has recorded that song, but yeah, collaborating with Diane for that record was just a lot of fun.
Who are you listening to?
I have to probably start with my son.
Ah, okay.
In terms of young pianists, I'm hearing that I like. So we're talking about father-son relationship. Another pianist I really dig playing is Gerald Clayton, who's
okay.
Pianist Aaron Parks. Very talented, brilliant pianist. And even though he's not one of the younger cats, but I still really dig what Brad Meldau, what he does. As a pianist, again, he's not one of the young guys anymore, but still one of my favorite pianists and composers is. Man, why am I drawing a blank?
Our own compositions.
Yeah, so another pianist I really like for piano and composition is Gonzalo Rubalcaba. He's from Cuba.
Cuban, okay.
He's a household name. All the cats, Herbie and Chick.
Wow.
He's not duos with both of them, but yeah, he's again pianist I find very interesting as a pianist and composer here. So much depth and history, especially you can be in Cuban.
Yeah.
You can hear the African influence.
Yeah, it's strong.
And who else? I mean, there are a bunch of guys that I might omit. I consider them masters now, like Eric Reed. But this young kid Joey Alexander is making a lot of noise.
Yes, he is.
So there are a lot of people just out there you don't hear about, but they're out there doing it, like Kevin Hayes. He's not a young cat, one of the young cats anymore. But of the young guys, I'm trying to, Emmett Cohen.
Yeah.
If I take me a minute to kind of think of them. But yeah, the composers. Usually I find out what attracts me to someone's playing or composing is that I can hear depth in it. There's a lot of history and depth. So it's like the first time, I told you first time I heard Prince, you could hear James Brown, you could hear Sly. Was playing. So on that alone, that's kind of attracted me to it. So usually the piano players that I really dig, I can hear, their own vocabulary coming through, but you can, Sullivan Fortner, of course.
Oh yeah,
He's another cat.
Yeah, he is. He's
Christian Sands. He's another guy.
Christian Sands, yeah.
Yeah, that I really, I've heard and just really dig. So I'm trying to think. Those are some of the ones that are just off the top of my head I can think of.
Tell me a little bit about the series that you're doing these days.
Yeah, I'm doing a master class on composing, composition, on the 19th of this month. And you can go to my Facebook page and you'll see the advertisement for it that's giving you the time and so on. But it'll be, I look forward to it because I feel like I'm good at answering questions. And I look forward to, interacting with the students and just talking about what makes my brain tick in terms of how I go about composing. Some of it might be somewhat different, and some of it, you'll probably find similar to what other people doing. I find, at least I've been told many times, that my approach somewhat different, and I think a lot of it's attributed to the fact that, I'm self-taught at playing the piano, self-taught. I've mentioned before, I haven't taken composition lessons. But to me, when you learn somebody else's song, if you learn a tune by Sam and Dave, you learn a tune by Monk, then if you learn it, you got a composition lesson. That's kind of what it is. But I think we all bring different experiences to the table. So for me, having played drums first and then picked up the piano and then I taught myself bass and then through junior high school, I played trumpet, baritone horn, and clarinet and saxophone. So I think you got a little bit more insight onto that place where composition meets arranging, and that's some of the best kind of writing I like here, when you hear a composition and you can't tell what part is. Are they making this up on the spot, or was it written out? So you got a lot of that in Monk's music, Tad Dameron's music, but definitely Wayne Shorter's music. Another great composer I dig a lot was Jaco Pastorius. Learned a lot of his music, especially on his first album, but then on the album he did with Weather Report. And, I've told you the story about hearing him for the first time live, and it was before he became really big. I was living in Boston, and Pat Metheny brought him to a gig, brought him up from Florida, and man, that's one of those moments where you tell you can tell somebody you knew where you were when John F. Kennedy was killed. So, the same thing with Prince. I tell people, first time I heard Prince, I know who I was. I had a friend of mine gig, and on that break they started playing Soft and Wet. And I said, man, what's that? And he said, oh man, that's that dude I've been telling you about, Prince. And he's playing all the instruments on it. So Jaco was one of those things, like stories again. The first time I heard him, it's like I can remember, but I told you, seeing Prince for the first time, it was a show with him and The Time and Vanity 6.
Yeah.
And that was a great show. Hearing Stevie at Memorial Stadium, that football stadium in Memphis. And I just remember he broke out, he played You're the Sunshine of My Life, which was just killing because you never know when he's going to play. He just got one of those ears, he could pull stuff out the air. Yeah. He played this one tune, and it sounded so futuristic. And then a few years later, it showed up on Songs of the Key of Life called Contusion. But at the time, he didn't announce what the tune was, and he broke into it. And it was just, man, I was thinking, man, where this cat getting this stuff from? And then later, like I say, it showed up on Songs of the Key of Life called Contusion.
Wow.
But, and so, like I say, I'm really a student of history, and I'm really hoping you all can make the master class on composing. I promise you it should be interesting, as well as the one on improvisation that'll come later. Because, like I said, one of my biggest accomplishments is through my writing, and I've had probably 80-some compositions of mine recorded, and in some cases, some of them been recorded 5 or 6 times. And so, for me, it's something that still hadn't hit me that another person wanted to record my song, that they thought it was something there that they want to express themselves through. So please sign up for the master class. I would joke and say, well, I got 4 kids and I need the money, but my kids are grown. But
That was a little old.
Was that?
I said that comment used to work 30 years ago.
Yeah, I always say you can look at. I tell people you can look at the way I'm dressed. You can tell I need some money. And so on the for real side, I'm really looking forward to this. This guy here who will be co-hosting with me. If nothing else, you'll get off from hearing him, the dialogue, and he's a brilliant singer, and I'm just glad he talked to me about doing this. So, but we'll see how it goes. But if you can look on my Facebook to get details, and I'll be posting things leading up to it. But I really look forward to seeing you all. And Lou, I want to just thank you, man, for taking the time to do this, because otherwise I'd be sitting home watching Lifetime stories. I'm just kidding, but yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, brother.
Hey, and me too, Donald. Listen, we need, and when you look at where we are now, right now is when we need Donald Brown music, and we need it playing through every pair of ears in the world.
That's always good to hear. I found, and there's probably a lot of artists, but when music kind of go in cycles, that they're out for a while and dealing with political and social issues, and then usually the next record kind of come back to to
something lightweight,
what everybody can relate to, because it's interesting now. What cause and effect. I remember some of the criticism I got from critics about, what is this guy trying to stir up, and what is he, and but now I know it's a lot of records coming out using spoken word and dealing with the situation of the country and the world right now. Mm-hmm. So, but like I say, you had people like the Last Poets, Scott Heron, who was doing this. It's not new.
It's not.
It's just coming. It's coming back, but.
Yeah.
So Lou, like I say, man, I appreciate you, and I appreciate the confidence that you, believed in me in terms of wanting me to produce your first album. And I love the fact the way we met. I'm going on Facebook and see you had recorded my tune, and it was listed on the Dawn Bird, so I got in touch with you and told you I really dig the tune, but I wrote it. And then it led to a friendship.
Yes.
Like I say, I know there are other things, we'll be doing in the future. So, but anyway, thank you again, brother, and I will see you on the 19th.
Okay. Thank you so much, Donald. Much success to you, and I just pray that God will give you all the strength that you can handle. So, because you've got some years ahead of you to continue making this music, because people need Donald Brown music going through those two earlobes. Thing, brother, and you just keep being who God made you to be.
Exactly.
That's it.
We want to thank Mr. Brown for sharing his considerable talent, time, music, and his experiences with us here on Royalcast Live. We also extend our support and well wishes for future success with the Donald Brown Music Career Masterclass Series. And that's our show, everyone. Hope we brought a smile to your face, some groove in your soul, and warmth to your heart. We hope to see you in a couple of weeks when we'll be right back here and we'll do it all again with a whole new show. Again, I'm Sweet Lou Olatosin, along with the Royalcast Live crew. And thanks for joining Royalcast Live!